across sectors. This session will emphasize the need for such targets and highlight how they can drive progress. Moderating the discussion today is Dr. Satish Kumar, President and Executive Director at EEEE. He will be joined by our esteemed panelists. May I request everybody to take the stage as I call your names, please? Dr. Satish. Mr. Alok Kumar, Director at the Lantor Group and former Secretary, Government of India. Mr. Padu S. Padmanabhan, author and international expert in energy and water productivity. Mr. Saurabh Kumar, Vice President, India at Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. We look forward to an exciting session.
Good morning, everybody, and a very warm welcome to FEED 2025. And it's an absolute honor and a privilege to have such a star cast, I think, for this fireside chat. And I must say that I'm very kicked with the three speakers who have spoken before us and set the context very, very well for us to delve deeper. Maybe I'll just start with a couple of things from what the speaker said. So Venkat referred, I think, Homo sapiens dominance, and he linked it with fire. And I just want to use one quote that fire can be used to heat and cool our homes, but it can also be used to burn down our home or our habitats. And California wildfires, I think, are an absolute example right in front of our eyes, I think, what is happening. Similarly, it is not good enough to generate electricity, but how do we use that electricity is equally, if not more important. And I think that's where energy efficiency comes into play, because we know that, I think, we have many technologies at our disposal today, but I think if we are able to avoid generating electricity, we know that's actually the most evolved form of, I think, the progress that we have made. So that's why we call energy efficiency the first fuel. Thanks, Venkat, for putting that into context. I also want to talk a little bit about, I think, this 2%, 1%, 4%. And I just want to remind people that what Albert Einstein said, compound interest is the most powerful force in the world. A person who understands it earns it, and a person who doesn't understand it pays it. And I think it doesn't matter whether it's 1% or 2% or 4%. I think as long as I think that compounding is happening, I think it will be always a very, very powerful force. Now we want, I think, the global world to achieve that 4% target, but I think the compounding part is extremely, extremely important. And I'm going to, I think, when I pose some questions, I think Sanjeev has, of course, I think he laid out many, many sort of like opportunities and options in front of the energy efficiency community on how I think this community can work with an entity, a sovereign fund like National Investment Infrastructure Fund. And that is really music to our ears, because we all know, I think, that financing and investment is something that we keep talking about, and we understand, I think, the challenges and the need to actually scale up investment. So I think a lot to discuss there as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to AEEE's 3 organizational goals. I'm going to reiterate that AEEE is committed to work, I think, with all the partners, government, private sector, civil society organizations, to create 100 gigawatt of demand offsets. I think that's something that we feel should be set as a national goal, and energy efficiency with all of you, I think, doing your part, can eminently deliver that. The second point is that we want to achieve 1 lakh crores, about $12 billion of investments coming into energy efficiency. And again, I think Sanjeev talked about some numbers, and I think wouldn't it be nice actually if we can attract that kind of investment to decarbonize our economy. And the third is, I think, you create 5 lakh jobs. So we are talking about, I think, a demand offset, we are talking about jobs, we are talking about investments. What I would like to do is, I'm going to start by giving an opportunity to our esteemed panelists to give like a brief opening remarks. I think the title of this fireside chat is Upping the Ante and Boosting Energy Efficiency for 2030 Goals. We know 2030 is a pivotal year. My request to Alok sir, Padu, Saurabh ji, is that we would like to sort of like keep it, I think, moving fast. And what I would do is that I will intersperse, I think, your comments and your remarks with some rapid fire questions. And you can respond to that questions. And if you want to elaborate upon that why are you choosing a particular answer, please do that, I think, in 30 seconds or 45 seconds. I hope that it will allow us to veer a little bit off from the scripted scripts. I think that is typically happens. And I would like to thank the team for coming up with what I feel are some really, really, I think, insightful questions. But without further ado, I'm going to invite Alok Kumar ji. Sir, we heard about, I think, India's leadership at G20. I think you played a pivotal role, I think, in India leading the Energy Transition Working Group and India coming out with a milestone document on energy efficiency. You have also worked in states. You have also, I think, you worked with the Indian discoms and these things. So, sir, I think if you can take like maybe a couple of minutes, and in the context of the discussions that has happened, what are the key points that you would like to put, I think, to share with this audience on how India can start to achieve the full potential of energy efficiency? Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Satish. Good morning, and thanks for inviting me for this discussion. We had this excellent presentation from IEA, and they had all the praise and compliments for India. So good, say we have done, I think, reasonably well, but I think a lot remains to be done. So if I see a slide about the India's energy efficiency improvement rate, and so they are plateauing. So there is some challenge there to keep it up. And the investments, the title was energy efficiency, but it added the RE investments. So if you break out the RE investments, I think investments are not coming into as they should come. Two things. We need to look for the areas we have not got into, because the areas we are into, they have been squeezed and the further scope is limited. So we need to look the new areas. In my view, what are the new areas? Is the MSME sector. We have done only some demonstration projects, some sample project reports, but we have not touched the MSME sector. 36% of manufacturing output comes from MSME in India. Second, in industry, we have been only focusing on steel, cement, and we have not focused on light industry, which consumes very significant amount of electricity. They are easy to handle. We need to focus on light industry. Buildings. I am informed that India will add around 3 billion square meter of residential area in up to 2030. And we may have done ECBC notification, but how many buildings or how many percentage of buildings are compliant to ECBC? I think they're negligible. So this is one area which we have not touched, and building is one where you will get locked into for 50 years. If you don't act fast, you lose opportunity. Our fuel efficiency for the heavy duty vehicle is way below what it should be. We have been slow and lax in imposing the more stringent and the current standards for fuel efficiency. One thing I want is is some action from other sector is the RERAs, the real estate regulatory agencies. They should be the main key factor for signaling the energy efficiency of a new flat which is being sold. Everybody looks at the RERA registration. If you signal it, I think it will make it will be a game changer. And last thing I would like to point out is India can do a lot by some green public procurement, which we have not done in so far. That will create a lot of demand for green goods and will give a boost. The real difficulty, our last point is, as our friend from NIA was saying, the ticket size is small. To scale up, you need strong institutions. We don't have one. I have seen very closely, both at the state level, central level. Our institutions are very small, not capable to do the task required. If we strengthen our institutions, the politicians will have confidence that investing political capital in energy efficiency will yield results in next 5 years. So in my view, the key intervention should be first, build strong and capable institutions. Then the politicians will pick up this area for delivery and to make it high on the political agenda. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Alokji, for, I think, covering the gamut of, I think, what energy efficiency can and should deliver, and what are some of the new areas, I think, where efficiency should start delivering. Padu, I'm going to come to you. You have seen the full arc of energy conservation, energy efficiency, energy productivity. And I know you also have worked with various ministries and regimes, I think, in your long and storied career. You also have some, I think, strong views, I think, to maybe pick up the gauntlet that Alokji is lying down, is that we need strong institutions. So I think as a country, how do we build these strong institutions? Should the government be building these strong institutions? Should our Prime Minister be taking a lead in building these strong institutions? Should the citizens be asking for, I think, these strong institutions? Because it also seems like a chicken and egg situation for, I think, for people who are working in this sector. So I would like you to maybe focus a little bit and share, I think, your thoughts maybe in the next couple of minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, but I think we need a funeral before a revival, if I might say so. And this is institutional-wise. And that's a very provoking question you asked me, and my response obviously has to be equally provoking. Notwithstanding the progress that we have made in energy efficiency over the years, and as you rightly said, some of us have been involved since the early 70s in energy efficiency and helped create institutions. I think the time has come now to reposition energy efficiency in the Indian bureaucracy, both at the central and the state levels. It has come because energy efficiency is taking on a very dominant position in the entire landscape of global climate change and so on. So given that, let us examine very briefly the advantages and disadvantages of the present structure. I have a question for Alok, and then I will, respond accordingly. Alok, I want you to wear your hat as the Secretary, Ministry of Power. If there were two people outside your office, one head of a utility, a big utility, the chairman of a utility, and another is, let's say, a person from an ESCO company, and your office assistant gives you their visiting cards, whom would you invite into the room first?
I think the I will invite the head of the utility because just let me, because the action starts with policy.
Okay, exactly. Now, if you have a Bureau of Energy Efficiency in the Ministry of Power, which is the supply ministry, where energy efficiency will get very little visibility, or will get some visibility, no doubt, where the funding will also be constrained, where much of the policy, as Alok rightly said, would be on the supply side of the energy equation, then we have a problem. Efficiency is now as important a subject as supply. There's absolutely no difference between the both. So we need to reposition energy efficiency in the government of India. Now, where can we reposition it? My sense is that one can think of repositioning it directly like the Department of Atomic Energy with the Prime Minister's office, where one can get directives and respond to national issues in a very collaborative, cooperative partnership with various ministries and so on. So I think that would be my answer to your question, that we need to reposition energy efficiency. That is one. Along with that comes another very important point, and that is energy efficiency must be viewed, and I think this point came up even in Venkat's opening remarks, in Brian's remarks too, that we must look at energy efficiency as a strategic energy resource, no different from oil, coal, and so on and so forth. In fact, the term first fuel basically tells you that more energy has been saved through energy efficiency than has been generated through oil, coal, and so on and so forth. So we have to be in tune with the terminology first fuel, and if it's to be first fuel, you have to have a ministry heading that first fuel. If you have a ministry for renewable energy set up in the 90s, in fact, there was a commission on additional sources of energy set up in the 70s by Mrs. Gandhi's government. And then you had later the Department of Non-Conventional Energy Sources. What did we have on energy efficiency? We had an energy management center supported by a few donors. Then we had the Bureau of Energy Efficiency many, many years after that. That also with the Ministry of Power on the supply side, and I've answered that question. And after that, really institution-wise, we have not done very much as far as the bureaucracy is concerned. So that's my answer.
Thank you, Padu. I think, and thanks for being provocative. I think you were indeed. I think with your response. Saurabhji, I'm going to come to you. Brian, in his remarks, said policies exist, technologies exist. What is needed is a strong action. You, I have demonstrated, I think, is some of these strong market actions, I think, in your prior roles. And when Sanjeev is saying that NIIF has a SEPA team, which is interested in making $50 million, $100 million investments, and ESL and NIIF did enter into like a joint venture. That's like one or two ventures we are talking about, right? What I think with the hindsight of all of that, with Sanjeev at the helm at NIIF CEO, what do you see you would like to do? I think if given an opportunity to scale, I think scale is the word that we keep hearing, and I think you are one of the best positioned persons to respond to that scale question, in my opinion. So what would be your response?
Thank you, Satishji. First of all, thanks for inviting me. And also thanks for inviting me on a panel where it's an honor, because I've learned so much from the three of you sitting here over the last 20 odd years. So I think many things which have been said by Mr. Alok Kumar and Padu, I completely agree, whether it is on institutions, whether it is on the kind of focus that needs to come in, the political will. But if you really ask me, the last time, in fact, the first time a mission was created for energy efficiency was way back in 2009 and 10. And that mission, essentially, if you see, focused on central government institution, the PAT scheme coming to the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, a market aggregation, which eventually led to the creation and setting up of EESL. I think what is needed now is a much more deeper mission for energy efficiency that lays out a much more ambitious target, and I wouldn't say 4%, let it be a 5% target. I'm pretty sure India can, with the kind of experiences that we have seen over the past. Of course, it has not been very deep in all respects, one or two. And what this mission needs to focus is, of course, strengthening central institutions, but going deeper into the states, because that's where most of the actions lie. So something that happened during Mr. Alok Kumar's tenure, the RDSS scheme, where states were onboarded to come in with some sort of incentives so that they start owning up. And today you see the difference. I mean, almost 100 million smart meters are out there in the open. If anybody would have asked this question 5 years ago, would you see 10 to 15 billion dollars of investments coming into distribution sector? I would have been the first one to say no, it is not. So again, answering, I mean, it's not an answer, but the way forward that Sanjeev raised is that if we have this very clear-cut objectives of reaching 5% of energy efficiency goals, getting the states on board, thereby enabling state-level institutions to be strengthened, and very clear mandates and targets. For instance, a national DSM policy, demand-side management policy. I mean, that has been, if you remember, talked about it right at the first time when the national electricity policy came out, but we are yet to see a national level DSM policy, and therefore there is no state level DSM policy. We have DSM regulations notified for the last maybe 15 years, hardly being used, Ujala being perhaps the only instance where a large scale deployment happened and investments happened. So I think focus on mission, much more ambitious, go down deep to the states, strengthen the institution.
Thank you, Saurabh ji. I'm going to talk about this state level, I think the role of states actually in scaling and mainstreaming energy efficiency. And I know that all three of you, I think, would have, some pretty good insights to share, I think, with this audience. But before we do that, here is my first lightning round of questions. I'll start with you, Alok ji. The best way to scale energy efficiency is through three choices: technology and innovation, favorable policy regime, finance and investments. And if you want to pick and then maybe respond that why do you think that should be the best way to scale energy efficiency?
Policy, of course. I feel
I don't expect any other answer from you, but maybe you can elaborate as well.
Technology exists, and finance is waiting. They are sitting here only. It's a policy. This means the policy prioritization is important. I'll give you one example. Like when I was in Uttar Pradesh, I was heading the energy department. The notification of building code was lying there for 4 or 5 years. I picked up it and got it approved from cabinet in 3 months. In Government of India, when I joined, the amendment to the this EC Act was lying in some files for 3 years. I picked it up and got it passed in 3 months. So if you can devote attention to policy in institutions, this is the highest priority in my view.
So maybe I will be a little provocative.
Please go ahead.
On this. I think all of us know that there are pretty good policies on energy efficiency in India. We look at buildings, we look at industry, we look at standards and labeling. I think many times the energy efficiency community believes that unfunded policy mandates are not that helpful. And why is it so that if we look at, I think, India's budget, going back several decades, why is, I think, the budget not being made available to implement some of these policies, excellent policies that are being put in?
Satish, story is otherwise. B is not able to spend the budget it is given. See, you have to see the institutional capability. I'm telling you, I'm hammering again and again. And when we were amending the Electricity and this Energy Conservation Act, there was a proposal which was not agreed to by PM at the time, that states need to have a standalone dedicated agency at a state. They say no, let the state choose whether they want to give it to somebody else and set up. No, that is not the correct stand. I still strongly feel we need topmost priority to set up a B in every state.
Sir, there are probably 100 organizations here sitting in the audience. They would say, we are very passionate, we have knowledge, we have expertise, we want to work to enable, I think, energy efficiency goals in India, but to get like a government contract, to get us paid, I think, why does it become so difficult in terms of our procurement process and other? So this is a complex problem. We all know the L1 issue and other things. How do we go beyond, I think, these issues that seem to be crippling us?
Again, the attention and detailing, like take the smart meter. When we made it part of RDSS, we drafted a fabulous contract with the built-in the payment security. There are 12 crore meters and there are investors lining up. So if it is the priority of the government and then ability to go into details is possible. So I think it is doable. You need just attention and focus. It is doable. It can be done.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. Okay. All right. Sorry. Yeah. Thanks, Jayanta. So I think I'm going to come to Saurabh for the next round of lightning round. If you are given rupees 10,000 crores to fund an energy efficiency project that would deliver 10 gigawatts of demand offset, what would that be? A, run a national super efficient motors program for the SME sector. B, run a super efficient fan program for low income group and economically weaker section households. Run a national ESCO program and provide tax holiday for ESCOs delivering minimum threshold of verifiable energy savings, say 10 megawatt, 100 megawatt hour.
Well, certainly the last one, because we want to create a market. If we have 10,000 crores, all others will only end up once I finish the 10,000 crores. But if I'm able to seed that market of ESCOs and people understand the efficacy and efficiency of this ESCO process, I think we have changed the face of the energy efficiency market forever.
I'm sure there are many ESCOs in the audience, and I think AEEE is also working, I think, with ministries to develop like a national ESCO program. So that's like music to our ears. And we will definitely reach out, I think, to seek your advice and thoughts on how to sort of like structure and work with you. Padu, I think a lightning round question for you. When we say energy efficiency, what's the image that conjures up in your mind? It could be an object, it could be policy, it could be an idea. What does it that comes to your mind?
When you talk about energy efficiency in India, frankly, I think we need to rethink it. That's what comes to my mind. Thinking energy efficiency is not difficult, it's pretty easy. But rethinking energy efficiency is what comes to my mind. Now, how do we rethink energy efficiency to meet the kind of goals that I've set apart? Let me give you just 3 very quick ideas. And this is notwithstanding the ideas that both Brian and Venkat and Sanjeev put. I totally subscribe to them. So these are in addition to the ideas that they put. The first idea is that we need to move from the tactical to the strategic. Energy efficiency, as is being proposed today, as being followed today, is very tactical. We need to now move it to the strategic. What do I mean by that? If you ask the question, how is energy used, which is what all industries ask their managers, how do you use energy? Then the answer is pretty straightforward. You do an energy audit, you find out where the major wastages are, and then you have projects in order to plug those wastages. End of story. And it's tactical because it's a boiler room question, a shop floor question, and answered at the shop floor level itself. Now, for a moment, if you ask the question, what is the energy used for? Then immediately you begin to think of the value that energy brings to that particular economic activity or the industry. What it really means is the energy being used to make a low-value product or a high-value product? Do you make, for instance, in a paper plant, cardboard or high-specialty paper? Or in aluminum industry, do you make aluminum ingots, or you go all the way and make fuselages for aeroplanes? Or for an engineering company, do you make alloys, mild steel, or do you make alloy steel which can be used in precision machine tools? You add value for every unit of energy you consumed. So I would think the first thing is to move energy efficiency from the boiler room to energy productivity at the boardroom. That's my first major suggestion. The second is, assuming that we look at energy efficiency as is being practiced today in industry, for instance. Well, most of the quick hits, the housekeeping measures, I don't even want to talk about it. It dominated my life in the 70s. That's all we talked about. It's already been covered. There are a whole lot of other measures which are known, which I would call as must-dos, the second quadrant of energy efficiency. The first quadrant is quick hits, the second quadrant is must-dos. Again, there's a lot of knowledge going around. Everyone does waste heat recovery, when you look at efficient motors, efficient lighting, etc., etc., etc. Now we are knocking on the doors of the third quadrant, and that is integrated energy efficiency designs, and we need to do a lot more there. Here, we don't look at energy efficiency in isolation. We look at the downstream and upstream impacts of energy efficiency. And there are many, many examples in Indian industry. You have pinch point analysis, you have cogeneration, you have water energy nexus, where you look at things in a very integrated way. So this is my second suggestion. And my last is, we never discussed that. We not discussed it enough. There are a lot of multiple co-benefits of energy efficiency, which are even more important than the energy saved. Many an industry would save energy, no doubt through energy efficiency measures, but they would also improve product quality. They would also reduce rejects. That's where the savings are. You're in the building sector, you have a lot of experience, Satish, and you know that, improved health of employees, improved productivity of employees, reduce absenteeism through better environment, indoor air quality. It saves energy, but it also improves all these things. We need to talk more about the co-benefits of energy efficiency. And we need to move energy efficiency in directions where the co-benefits prevail. So that is my third and last point.
Thank you, Padu. Alokji, I need to come back to you on the role of states, I think, in helping us tap the full potential of energy efficiency. And I think with your extensive experience of having both worked at the state level and the central government level, sir, you would know that the 74th constitutional amendment actually provided a lot of powers to the states. But do you think that the intent of that constitutional amendment that was done, where I think the states and the urban and local bodies were supposed to actually carry on the larger agenda, I think, of the federal structure in the form of form, functions, and funding, really happen? Because I think if you look at the number of, I think, government people who are deployed at the state and local level as opposed to federal level, And when you compare that to say, I think what the numbers are in the US or in China and in India, I think there is a very, very stark difference, I think, in that. So even though I think a constitutional amendment is there, we want the states and I think the local governments to actually step up, but are we really empowering them fully, I think, with the delegation of responsibility, with the freedom and flexibility that they need, and with the funds that they need to carry on that function?
I think this is a much wider question, not related to much to the topic of energy efficiency, but let me address this. I don't think, because politically, the lower levels of the democracy have to assert, because there is a reverse tendency of centralization. Central government wants to do what a state should do, and the state wants to do what local bodies should do. So this is a democratic process. It will take time. Some work has been done, but significantly it has not been done. And if we correlate that aspect to energy efficiency, I think urban local bodies would have very, very important role. So this work needs to be done. And I think the priorities at urban local bodies are pretty different. They're struggling with some basic functions like cleaning or street lighting or housekeeping, tax collection and all. So if we come back to energy efficiency area, what states need to do a faster integration of the building codes into the building bylaws, because once they become building bylaws, they get quite reasonably, say, implemented. And do some capacity building of the people who are relevant for like architects or the material suppliers, or some capacity building is important. But you started with the states. If we have one more thing, states are hugely and solely responsible for the pricing of electricity. And I feel the way we price electricity, higher for industries and lower or almost free for the households. That is, I think, the one which states should be made to do through some proper incentives, through finance commission or whatever it is it takes in the federal democracy. If electricity pricing is done properly, if you make it nearer to cost for industries, they will move faster on electrification. And if you limit the free power to only few lifeline households, the incentive to adopt efficient appliances will be much, much higher for ordinary citizens or households. So states need to do both, in my view, to very, very precise. The better way of electricity pricing, I think you need to incentivize it. And second is to enable to say capacity building and select implementation framework for, because major role for local bodies is in the implementing building codes. I'll stop it.
Thank you. Saurabh ji, Government of India is working hard to create like a carbon market in India, which is, I think, one of the market mechanisms that we can think about. So do you believe some form of carbon tax is the ultimate market mechanism to tap the full potential of energy efficiency in a net zero economy? And if yes, then how would you want that to sort of like be integrated into India's net zero journey?
So Satish, I'm not someone who advocates for mandates and taxes, because I feel energy efficiency, and if you look at the statement of objects and reasons for the Energy Conservation Act, it says very clearly that because it's a market-based thing, government should only intervene where it needs to intervene, and it only gives out 3 areas. So we have a carbon tax for more than 10 years now on coal. So there's nothing new. But I think a market-based mechanism of carbon, making sure that you increasingly have more demand for these carbon certificates, which may perhaps need to go outside of the designated consumers that the Bureau of Energy Efficiency has. How do you create this demand? Maybe by saying that X percentage of your CSR budget needs to go for carbon. And the government can specify every couple of years that these are the priority sectors that we need to go ahead and do. Similarly, public procurement mandates which drive more shift towards green procurement. So I would say, given the fact that we are just about unveiling a carbon market, instead of putting carbon tax and essentially doing what? Increasing the prices of fossil fuel-based energy, and let's be very clear that we are not going to have a fossil-free energy systems anytime in the next 2 decades. So, as Mr. Alok Kumar said, if you keep on increasing the cost of energy, you will see industries not decarbonizing, not electrifying. We are seeing exodus of, not exodus is not the right word, but new industries going to Gujarat, whereas Maharashtra is not seeing that kind of investment. And the reason is very simple. The tariffs in Maharashtra, industrial tariffs, are perhaps the highest in the world. So I don't think carbon tax for an economy like India is the right way forward. Yes, a market-based carbon program, which I think is on the anvil, hopefully we'll see this working very, very soon, is what will drive decarbonization much faster.
So, Padhu, maybe, and Saurabh, you can also respond to this question. A lot of, I think, us people like who are present in the room, there is a large body of policy work that is happening. And I think if we talk about building energy codes and PAT programs and standards and labeling. But there is also a school of thought that feels that much more work needs to happen on the industrial policy side. I think we have started to see, I think, the PLIs and other things. And I just want to give like maybe a couple of international examples. The way I think China, I think in its 12th five-year plan, put emphasis, I think on what are the futuristic technologies that is going to receive significant support, government support. And we are seeing, I think, in terms of whether we are talking LEDs, whether we are talking battery electric vehicles, whether we are talking compressor technologies, I think it is reaping the reward. Same thing we have seen, I think it happened with Inflation Reduction Act, which was also like a significant industrial policy that was put in place by the US. How do you see that, I think apart from the vanilla, I'm using the word vanilla, but only because I think these are the policies that have been in place for the last several decades. How do we move from those vanilla policies to some of the industrial policies that is really going to create like a much bigger ecosystem of supply side solutions, which sometimes a lot of people say that it's not cost effective or we are importing these solutions from China. How do we actually start to change that? I think, so maybe I think Saurabhji and then Padhu.
So I think PLI scheme that has started off in the last few years perhaps will get expanded to other frontier sectors. We just read in the papers today that there is a critical mineral mission that has been launched by the government. So I think government is doing its bit, but as I said, that we need a much deeper energy efficiency mission, not just focused on the states, but also possibly towards industrial decarbonization. And that's something, again, in the recent amendment to the Energy Conservation Act that Mr. Alok Kumar referred, is now clearly a mandate with the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. So I think expanding that, deepening this mandate, creating incentives, and in the mission that I mentioned, which should be different from the mission that was unveiled 15 years ago, there should be some incentives there, particularly for hard-to-abate sectors, maybe for institutional strengthening at the state level, and so on and so forth. Padhu?
Interesting question. We began our energy efficiency work with industry. In those days, we didn't use the word energy efficiency, we used the word fuel efficiency. In fact, fuel efficiency started in industry by accident. It's a long story, I don't want to get into all of that. But at that time, the textile industry in Mumbai had a problem. They were not getting enough coal. Coal was coming from Bengal, Bihar, and these railway wagons were stuck in the Western Ghats due to accidents and so on. So the availability and reliability of coal supply to textile industry in Bombay was questionable. At the same time, two refineries had come up in Mumbai, Esso and Caltex. They had excess of furnace oil, fuel oil, heavy viscous oil. And they did not know what to do with it. And they said, hey, we can sell it to textile. And textile said, yeah, we'd love to buy it, but we don't know how to burn fuel oil. There was very little experience in India to burn furnace oil. The Planning Commission was seized of the problem. They got in experts from the UK, the National Institute of Fuel Efficiency Services. They came to India. They set up a fuel efficiency cell in the National Progress Council. And, that's how the whole fuel efficiency program started with Indian industry. And it continued to build with Indian industry, and buildings and all that came much, much later. Now, your question is, what further can be done to expand the scope in Indian industry? And I'm with you on that question. But let us be realistic. Let us be realistic and understand where does India's advantage lies in being the leader in energy efficiency in one area. Should we be in multiple areas or not? Let's look at facts and statistics. 50% of a total, not 50, 45% of the total energy consumed in the country goes to Indian industry. 50% of that is in 4 or 5 industries, the energy intensive industries, such as steel and cement and petrochemicals and fertilizers and refineries. And in each of this, except for cement, in each of this, Indian energy intensity is at least 50 to 100% more than the best available technology in the world. In cement, we are about 30% more than the best available technology, and we are the most efficient in cement. So keeping cement aside for a moment, we are way behind the Japanese or the Europeans or even the Americans in some of the energy intensive sectors. Do you think in the short to medium term, we can cover this gap? I would hope we could, but I don't think that's realistic. If you look at 1935 or 1940, perhaps after 1940, we might catch up and we may have our own technology that clean energy, green energy manufacturing would then be, one of the leaders in the world. But until then, that's not our area of specialization. What is our area of specialization? And my last point, and that is in conservation and frugality. It's extremely important. It's now getting a lot more importance. The first priority is conservation over energy efficiency. We need both, but the first priority is conservation. And in conservation, we have the ethical, the historical, the cultural background to be world leaders. And the LIFE program, Lifestyle for the Environment, which was, I think in COP26, where the Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, mentioned about it. And until then, and since then, there's this LIFE program in the country. Needs to be doubled and redoubled in terms of its effectiveness and its scale and scope. I think that's where we in India can be seen as leaders. So to answer your question, industrial sector is very important. They will do what it takes, but they are not going to be world leaders for some more time in energy efficiency. We have to now look at getting the people's involvement. See, the United States, for instance, is very good in project-centric projects. Europe is management-centric energy efficiency projects. In India, we are project-centric, management-centric, but we need to now move into people-centric projects.
Thank you, Padu. Alokji, you want to comment on industrial policy? And when I said industrial policy, I was not meaning industrial sort of like manufacturing sector. For instance, I'll just give one example to elaborate that point. We are still building a lot. I think by some estimates, you mentioned, I think we are going to build probably like another 40 to 50% of our existing building stock in the next like 20 years. But if you look at what kind of construction is happening in the large high-rise residential sector, the default technology is concrete, not even masonry, and which is fast, which can ensure quality. But from a heat transfer, from ECBC compliance or ENS compliance, RETV compliance, it is just not going to actually help comply you with that. If you go and talk to the developers, large developers, they say it is not our responsibility to build if the solutions are not available. So what I'm talking about, that can the industrial policy encourage Indian manufacturers to design low embodied carbon building materials with superior heat transfer properties, and government can incentivize that this is the material that I think we will incentivize. If you build it, I think we will promote, I think, these technologies. But it's a complex ecosystem. Nobody is sort of like willing to, I think, grab the bulls by the horn, and everybody is passing the buck, I think, in terms of that this is not my problem. So I'm just trying to frame that industrial policy discussion, I think, in that context, that how do you identify some of these glaring holes, which is, I think, in not allowing India to realize the full potential, and also the manufacturing sector not really stepping up in the way, even though we see that there is a massive potential for building materials innovation and large scale deployment.
Satish, there are two things. Be it industrial energy efficiency or be it the new construction in buildings. I think we need to take a new approach. You first create demand for innovative solutions. So you need to have outcome-based regulations, whether they are energy conversion buildings or whether they are carbon emission, say, intensity reduction. So there are already policies in place. We need to move faster for targets, like the latest amendment in the ECBC, the Energy Conservation Act. Now it has now Energy Conservation Sustainability Building, ECSBC codes. So there are two ways. One is the very detailed like methodology. One is the outcome based, that your EPI should be below this level, and if you then you get the certification. Similarly, for the carbon credit trading scheme, we intend to give the reduction for your emission intensity for per unit of production. So I believe we should create demand by faster implementation of these obligations under the CCTS and faster implementation of the building codes for large residential buildings. Mind it, the new amendment says the load has to be above 120 kilowatt. So we exempted the small households and all. So larger buildings, they're all covered. Once you impose these obligations, you implement building codes, you create demand. Then you identify some potential technologies or innovative solutions. And government needs to give, say, proper policy framework and proper incentives or support to promote these technologies. So once you have these two things in place, you create demand and let the entrepreneur, let the developer choose or the industrialist choose which solution is best for him. Let it be determined in market, not by carbon tax. And then you have the bouquet of the materials or technologies which are possible. And government should support promoting those technologies to the extent they are required to commercialize them. Once you have this composite approach, I think what you are saying, things will move faster. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm getting signs that I think we should probably wrap up. I'll have one more lightning round of questions. And I think there are some questions from the audience as well. So, Padu, I'll start with you. What is the main reason for India not achieving its full energy efficiency potential? And we need to keep it brief. So, insufficient implementation of the policies that we have, not enough focus on industrial policy, or the political economy of India?
I think I will go for the political economy of India. See, on politics, we have what is known as the ribbon syndrome. On the supply side, if there is a power plant coming up, there are politicians ready to cut the ribbon to inaugurate the power plant. Even substations in villages, in towns, have politicians vying for one another to be in that particular ceremony. Even transformers in my village in Kerala, when it was set up, you had the local leader going and putting a garland around it and so on. So there is this ribbon syndrome, which is not there on the demand side. Now, energy efficiency requires community action, it requires political leadership, and yet no political party or ideology has embraced energy efficiency as a message, which is unfortunate because of two reasons. One is energy efficiency is a people's movement. It involves communities. It involves, spreading the message among the populace, and politicians are not stepping up and taking that leadership. That's one critical missing. The second one, and I'll be very brief about it, is there are bills and statutes and codes and laws which need to be discussed in Parliament. They're not even being tabled in Parliament. There's no joint parliamentary committee on energy efficiency. See, these are the things which will move the political mandate on efficiency. So both at the ground level and at the policy level, we have a basic missing link here.
Thanks, Padu. Saurabh ji, what's more likely by 2030? BLDC fans outselling traditional fans? India's largest states instituting time of day tariffs and running demand response and demand flexibility programs? Building energy codes, both ECBC and ENS, starting to get enforced in most Indian states?
All three, and possibly more. Because I firmly believe we can not just achieve 4%, but we can exceed it and go beyond 5%. And you'll need all three, and perhaps much more than what you listed out there.
You are the most diplomatic person, huh? Alok ji, I think the last question from my side to you. If you were the energy efficiency czar of India, what would be your first mandate? Require energy intensive buildings above 120 kilowatt or more to disclose their energy/carbon footprint, make government lead by example, and link operation and maintenance budgets of ministries and departments with energy performance, and C, mandate public procurement of energy efficient appliances, building materials, and energy services.
Obviously, the C, mandate public procurement, it will have both, it will create market, and it will also support innovation. That is the most appropriate thing to do for India.
Okay, thank you very much for indulging me on my rapid fire questions. We do have some questions that has come through the Mentimeter. I want to thank people in audience for taking the time to put these questions. So maybe I think there are like 4 or 5 questions. I don't know if we'll have time to go through all. How much time do we have remaining, Jayanta? Another 10 minutes or 5 minutes? Okay, so maybe I'll take 3 questions here and request people to be brief. So given that different states have varying priority sectors for energy efficiency, how can synergies be established across states to unlock the potential for doubling energy efficiency in India? This is, I think, so I'm going to skip this. I think anyone of you want to actually respond to this question? It was supposed to be me. I don't want to take time.
You can make a state-specific plan based on the data availability and the solutions available.
Right.
I think one can devise a state-specific plan.
So there are state energy efficiency action plans that are getting developed.
You have state climate change action plans, and this is a part of it. It is doable because if you analyze the present trend, yeah.
Padu, this is for you. From an international perspective, what lessons can India learn from countries successfully implementing quantifiable energy efficiency targets?
A lot of lessons. In fact, we did learn some lessons from the heat management law in Japan of the 50s, where they had come out with certain standards, and that actually plugged into some of the norms for energy consumption in Indian industry, drawn from some of those standards. But since then, there's been a lot of evolution in energy efficiency in many of these countries, and we need to be open to, embracing them. I can't immediately think of any particular law, but the IEA's reports have consistently pointed out to what are the best practices happening. And we also heard this morning that why can't we look around the world, and that's a point that Brian made, to find out which is the best practice in different areas and then incorporate it in the Indian system. So I think there has to be. But I must say one thing, and it's anecdotal, and it's very interesting, that in the 70s, when we were a small team in PCRA, I was on deputation to PCRA, and at that time, we used to get information coming in from different countries, but it used to come by mail, and it used to take a long time for that information to come to us. We read a report at that time, on energy service companies. The idea was being bandied about in the US that there's this concept, and we were excited. We thought that this is interesting. And there was a meeting we had with senior government officials in which I think me or my colleague summoned up enough courage to talk about business opportunities through energy service companies. And from the little we understood is there's something known as guaranteed savings schemes, or there is something known as shared savings schemes. And the immediate reaction was, no, energy efficiency is your patriotic duty. It should be done from a sense of altruism. You should not bring in business practices into energy efficiency. And the whole subject got discarded.
Fortunately, things have changed, I guess.
But fortunately, things have changed from a very socialist license Raj days, where we thought energy efficiency is a person's duty. And the slogans that we came out with were, save fuel while driving, otherwise walk to your destination. Save fuel to save the nation. That kind of a thing has completely changed. But I thought I'll mention this because the term energy service companies was mentioned, and I was reminded of this anecdote, which I have kind of repeated it in my book too.
So thanks, Padu. One last question, and maybe Alokji and Saurabhji, both of you can, I think, share your perspective. So we touched upon this. Demand flexibility and demand response are crucial for resource adequacy and for decarbonizing our energy system. Yet only a few states have introduced early stage regulations. How can innovative business and financial models help mainstream demand flexibility and demand response, especially as progress continues to focus more on the supply side? So this we see as an opportunity for energy efficiency community to sort of play a wider role. So
I think in the framework of resource adequacy, demand response is emerging as a very potential action area, and it requires two things to happen. First, on the ground, we need a smart metering to educate, incentivize the consumer in real time the benefits and importance of demand response. And second, a regulatory framework to be initiated by the Central Commission. In our country, whatever CRC makes the regulation, most of it is get percolated to the states, maybe with a lag of 1 or 2 years. So demand response is emerging, and I'm very sure in the next 1.5 to 2 years, you will see a lot of action, real action happening in demand response. Once we, in parallel, complete the smart metering of the system, a consumer-friendly app, or say possibility of messaging him, and there is a good business opportunity for the aggregators, because demand response can't be implemented by distribution companies or by only regulator. You need effective business platforms to aggregate the response and get to the market. Thank you.
So I'll just add to what Mr. Alok Kumar said, and One of the things that will possibly increase innovation and also the scale of DR or demand flexibility is digitization of the grid. One aspect is the smart meter that is going on, but what we have started, and I'll take just 1 minute to explain, we are creating a digital twin of the distribution network, which means you're mapping each and every asset and creating a single line diagram digitally. It's a very elaborate exercise. Each distribution utility has about 10 million assets that need to be physically mapped. But we are well on course of doing this in Rajasthan, and we hope to complete this by about September. Once we have this framework with us, and the regulatory framework as well, I think it just the innovations can do wonders in terms of demand response and demand flexibility.
Thank you. So I think before we wrap up, I just want, on a lighter note, I think the news is like full of this DeepSeek Chinese startup which is disrupting the AI world and doing it at a cheap. And I heard this term called Jevons paradox. Maybe I think people have heard about this. And it talks about, I think this is named after an English economist, William Stanley Jevons. And he describes a situation where technological progress increases the efficiency of a resource's use, thereby decreasing the unit cost to utilize the resource. And I was reading about it, and Satya Nadella and all these people were saying that, oh, we don't need to worry about it. It's actually good for the, I think, computational, progress that is being made. And I was just reminded of the rebound effect, that I think when people say that, hey, energy efficiency, I think we have saved this much, but I think in real terms, energy, consumption has not come down. So just like a quick one sentence thing, what do you think about rebound effect? And I think should energy efficiency be concerned about it, or what should we be doing to actually put a cap on the amount of energy that we are consuming?
No, absolutely. You see, the efficient smaller car have led the people to go for SUVs. So we need to be worried about this rebound effect, because you have complacency. You save, you can invest, you can. TV is efficient, you bigger TV. You want an SUV. So this is the challenge before the policymakers to control the overall energy consumption.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Padu. Quick one.
I wouldn't be worried about the rebound effect. It's bound to happen as the economy grows, as people get richer, as aspirations increase. They will use the energy saved in order to use other energy appliances. I would not be worried about the rebound effect.
Okay. Saurabh ji?
I think I agree with both, and there will be a rebound effect, but we as policymakers or those sitting in the policy making, they should be innovative enough to figure out how to do this. One example, SUVs are coming up, push for electric vehicles, push for green hydrogen vehicles. Maybe that reduces the overall energy consumption, but you can't take away the fact that I am getting richer, I need a bigger car.
Okay, and that will be the last word. So please put your hands together for a wonderful,
Thank you so much for an enlightening chat. May I please request the panelists to come closer to the stage for a group photograph? I now request Dr. Satish to please present a token of our appreciation. Thank you so much. We will now take a short networking break for tea and coffee. Please take this opportunity to mingle